Facebook are manipulating our stupid governments and lying to us, and they're getting away with it. This series of events, or this peculiar situation, has come about because big tech companies have a far deeper understanding of the way that the industry they prosper in operates, yet governments require them in order to succeed and successfully communicate. I spoke to Brittany Kaiser, former head of operations at Cambridge Analytica, who now runs the Own Your Data campaign, on my podcast Under the Skin, available from Luminary on Apple. You should check it out. In this conversation, she talked about how Mark Zuckerberg is a kind of figure that's impossible to pin down, that the government in the United States of America didn't have enough power to even make him appear before Congress, how around the world governments don't have enough understanding or legislation to combat and control the threat that these big tech companies now propose. Have a listen to this conversation, because Brittany Kaiser has been right on the inside of these issues. She knows how government can, and the relationship they have with big tech companies, is used to manipulate you. Ultimately, this is what we're interested in, to how to understand how we, as ordinary, engaged, awakening citizens, can interact with these powerful centralized forces in our lives and not just be immersed in a binary deluge. Check it out.
Is it in any way distinct, like you're saying, foreign intervention in, say, domestic politics in either the United States or the UK? How is that particularly distinct from our knowledge that transnational monopolies have influence, governmental influence through lobbying, are able to get exempted from legit taxation, and manage their sort of their marketplaces, as they would regard them, through power exercised at that level? How is that different from foreign intervention through technological leverage?
So I think that's where we have so much trouble with bringing people like Mark Zuckerberg to account. He seems to be able to get away with nearly everything because his company has such a strong presence in every country in the world. So every country individually has to take up legal issues with Facebook and complaints. And, you know, the UK wasn't even able to get Mark Zuckerberg to show up in Parliament. I mean, that's insane. You know, I just can't imagine that. And they didn't.
Right, but he just said, "I'm not coming."
Yeah, he just said, "I'm not coming." Literally, he sent other people from Facebook on his behalf and wouldn't sit there in Parliament. And I mean, it's shocking. Like I was very happy to do it. You know, it's a scary thing to do, to be sitting in Parliament being cross-examined by MPs for 3.5 hours. But, you know, it's pretty easy to tell the truth. I think what Mark's problem is that he's just memorized a lot of lines from his lawyers and is afraid to be caught off guard. Because his testimony in Congress in the US was majorly embarrassing.
Really?
Yeah, quite.
What did it reveal?
It revealed that there is a lot of information that Mark pretends not to know, that Facebook is claiming false claims on when they knew about certain things, when they did and did not take action. And unfortunately, what also became clear was that a lot of our legislators and politicians are not as up to scratch with how technology works as they should be. I mean, I've really spent the past few years working with legislators, investigators, politicians to help people understand how technology works, because we can only regulate it to protect people from bad actors if everyone really has a firm understanding of how the devices work, how your data is collected. You know, we're not a very digitally literate population globally.
No, it's interesting because I suppose to exact that degree of regulation requires a kind of global consensus at a time when globalization is perhaps viewed with some suspicion and antipathy, the consequences of globalization from a corporate perspective, and as you've already tagged, from an immigration perspective in the minds of many people, is an unpopular idea. And of course, these are now sort of behemoth countries that will resist companies. Actually, did I say countries? There's no difference anymore. Companies that will resist that kind of regulation. I can't see how it would ever be imposed, particularly with the long-standing relationships between governments and corporate interests, of which this is really just an extension, but where the balance of power seems to be, as indicated by your Mark Zuckerberg example then, and I'm sure by countless others, where the balance of power is shifting in quite an evident way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really where I see, I'm going to continue to use Facebook as my favorite example.
Why, you think it's the worst one?
Yeah, I really do, in terms of flagrant disregard for the law. And just to, address your comments about globalization, Facebook takes its American-based product and takes it out to the world. And luckily for Mark, most of the world has not written data protection and privacy laws. But Europe has. So across Europe, that's really where Facebook has had the biggest issues, because your data is protected in Europe. Even before GDPR, most countries had at least some sort of data protection law, even if it was outdated. For instance, between Facebook and the Leave campaigns in Brexit, they were tried under the 1998 Data Protection Act, which meant that we could only charge Mark £500,000 as a capped maximum instead of 7% of his annual income, which would have been, quite a
more than that. I think that would be more than 500,000.
Yeah.
I don't know much about maths though either. That's another subject I don't know much about. Okay. Wow. So this is very, obviously it's a whole new territory in which power operates has opened up. This territory, I suppose what you are contesting, is the most significant territory for managing how power operates, both corporate and political power. And the most dominant entities within it, you'd say, are either malevolent or at least morally indifferent. And so we're kind of exposed to potentially quite dangerous situations. And I like the example you gave about the blue lives, black lives manipulation. I suppose what I feel intuitively, Brittany, is that all we are witnessing is what has always happened, just through a new lens. That there's always been the colonization of physical space. Now there's the colonization of sort of a cyber space. We've always seen populations guided to vote against their best interests. We've always seen relationships between government and powerful institutions that transcend legitimate governance. And what is unique about this? Is it that the power is ubiquitous and potentially? What's your nightmare scenario, I suppose?
I would say we're pretty much in the nightmare scenario already, fighting very hard to get out of it, but we're moving so quickly. Emerging technologies are something that the law is always going to struggle to keep up with. I mean, that's first and foremost. But now we've realized that the laws that we already have in place, without even writing new ones, we can't enforce those in our digital life. For instance, Facebook has a policy that they say they don't want to censor politicians, but that's not what we're asking them to do. The censorship is when you are, you're deleting content that should otherwise be heard, and that person has the right to free speech. The right to free speech is not an unchecked right. I have no right to incite violence upon you. I have no right to slander and libel you. I have no right to make people hate you for your race. Incitement of racial hatred is something that unfortunately comes out of a lot of political campaigns these days. Those are laws that we already have, yet somehow deciding not to censor people like Donald Trump allows all of those laws to be broken. And that's really where we have the biggest issue at the moment, enforcing the laws that we already have on big corporates who seem to, just be able to get away with this. So the nightmare scenario is here, but it has the potential to get a lot worse. If we think about the development of AI and robotics and how far this could actually go in terms of both corporate companies and governments being able to fully predict all of our actions before we even take them, being able to intervene in our daily lives. I mean, I was at a tech conference last year where I saw people using paint that actually created data about how you walked around the room. So your walls are creating full data sets about every tiny movement that you make. So before we get there, before we get all the way into IoT, the Internet of Things, where our coffee machine, our fridge, our walls are going to be producing data about us, we really need to secure what our data rights are. I think I'm pretty glad that you referenced kind of the historical perspective, because the way that I see it is that, data is now the world's most valuable asset. In 2017, The Economist said that it surpassed the value of oil and gas, right? So traditionally, when we're looking at the world's most valuable assets, vulnerable populations have always been exploited. The more powerful come in and they take those assets away from the people who have produced them or away from the people who own the land where it is produced. And, we look back on that in disdain. we look back on that as historical tragedy, right? And our most valuable assets are being taken from us every day. We can't even see it. Most people don't understand it. And we don't have the powers in a lot of countries to stop that. But we're getting there. We're getting there.
If you enjoyed that conversation, maybe you'll consider going over to Luminary, which is available on Apple, or you can download the Luminary app anywhere, and you can listen to one conversation per week like that. I've had everyone on there: Jordan Peterson, Jocko Willett, and Candice Owens. All these people have been on my podcast, and you can get it for a subscription. Also, I do a weekly meditation on there. If you want more direct communication with me, please go to russellbrand.com right now and sign up to my mailing list. And if you enjoyed this video, why don't you watch this one? It's a lot like it. It's got qualities that this video's got. Or if you need to meditate now and chill yourself out, go over to Awakening, my side channel. Have a little meditate, have a little chill, and subscribe to that channel too. Thank you very much for watching.